You are. He likes you. You like him. And both of you are standing there pretending nothing is happening. That is not romance. That is fear dressed up as confusion. You are. Let's strip this down to truth. Attraction is not subtle when it's real. It leaks through body language, through prolonged eye contact. You are. Through the way silence between you feels charged instead of empty. It shows up in the way he remembers small details you mentioned once. You are. It shows up in the way you adjust your tone when you speak to him. It shows up in how both of you linger a few seconds too long before walking away. You are. This is not coincidence. This is biology, psychology, and emotion aligning. But instead of acting with courage, you are. You both retreat into ambiguity because ambiguity feels safer than rejection. Here is the brutal reality. You are not confused. You are afraid. Afraid of misreading it. You are. Afraid of losing the connection. Afraid of looking foolish. And so you perform this silent dance, subtle jokes, half compliments, playful teasing, accidental touches. You are. Delayed replies designed to seem casual. You are negotiating with your own insecurity instead of confronting it. Mutual attraction has patterns. You are. When he finds reasons to be near you without a logical excuse, that is not random. You are. When conversations stretch longer than necessary and neither of you wants to end them, that is not politeness. When he mirrors your posture, your pace, your energy, you are. That is subconscious alignment. And when you feel that sharp awareness of him entering a room before you even see him, you are. That is your nervous system responding to significance. The body does not lie, the mind does. But here's where weakness enters. You are. Instead of taking responsibility for what you feel, you analyze it to death. You ask your friends, you replay conversations. You are. You look for hidden meanings in text messages. This is not strategy. It is avoidance. And avoidance kills possibility. The longer two people hide behind pride, you are, the more likely the moment passes. Attraction that is not acted upon decays into regret. You want strength. Strength is not dominance. Strength is clarity. You are. It is the ability to say, I enjoy being around you without attaching your self-worth to the outcome. You are. It is the willingness to risk a no because you respect yourself enough to seek truth over comfort. Weak people wait for perfect certainty. You are. Strong people create certainty through action. Understand this tension grows when feelings are suppressed. That electric awkwardness between you is not awkwardness. You are. It is unexpressed honesty. You both feel it when conversations suddenly deepen. When eye contact holds just a fraction longer than normal. You are. When teasing becomes personal but not cruel. When he protects you subtly in group settings. When you notice him noticing you. These are signals, not fantasies. You are signals. But if neither of you steps forward, something predictable happens. One of you pulls back to regain control. Games begin. Delayed responses. You are. Forced indifference. Suddenly what was natural becomes strategic, and strategy contaminates authenticity. You move from connection to competition. You are. And competition destroys intimacy before it even begins. The truth is simple and uncomfortable. Mutual attraction requires one person to break the stalemate. You are. Not dramatically, not recklessly, but directly. A calm invitation, a clear statement, a step forward that says, you are. I'm not afraid to find out. That single act shifts the entire dynamic from guessing to grounding, from tension to direction. You are. You cannot build anything meaningful on silence. Silence is safe, but it is sterile. It produces nothing. If you admire strength, become strong. If you want clarity, you are. Embody clarity. Stop looking for undeniable proof. You will never get 100% certainty without communication. Life does not reward hesitation. You are. It rewards responsible risk. And let's address the deeper issue. If you cannot express simple attraction, how will you handle conflict, commitment, vulnerability? You are. This small moment is a test of character. Are you someone who hides behind comfort or someone who moves toward what matters? You are. Because every meaningful relationship demands courage at the beginning, not grand gestures. Just honest movement. He likes you. You like him. The signs are there. You are. Consistent attention, emotional responsiveness, protective energy, nervous laughter, lingering presence. But signs are not outcomes. Action is. So decide who you are. You are. The person who watches opportunities expire, or the person who steps into discomfort and grows. Attraction is natural. Fear is natural. You are. But leadership over your own life is a choice. If you want something real, act in alignment with reality. Speak clearly. Stand firmly. Accept the answer with dignity. You are. Because in the end, regret weighs more than rejection. And strength is built the moment you choose truth over comfort. You are. Mutual attraction is revealed through consistent behavior, not words. Not through late night confessions. Not through dramatic promises. You are. Not through clever lines crafted to impress. Real attraction shows itself in patterns, steady, observable, undeniable patterns. You are. It is in the way someone repeatedly chooses proximity, the way they prioritize your presence without announcing it, the way their attention sharpens when you speak. You are. Even in a crowded room, words are cheap because they cost nothing to produce. Behavior costs energy, time, focus. You are. And those are currencies people do not spend carelessly. Anyone can say, I like you. Few will consistently show up. Anyone can flirt for entertainment. You are. Very few will invest attention over weeks and months without fading. Attraction that is real does not spike and disappear. It stabilizes. You are. It becomes predictable in its effort. He checks in. He remembers details. He follows through. You notice the reliability. You feel the rhythm. That rhythm is evidence. You are. Consistency is evidence. Human beings reveal their priorities through repetition. If someone rearranges their schedule to see you more than once, you are. That is not accidental. If they initiate contact regularly without being prompted, that is not boredom. If they maintain eye contact, lean in, mirror your gestures, you are. And hold physical space close to you whenever possible. That is not coincidence. The body does not perform sustained alignment without internal motivation. You are. The nervous system moves toward what it values. But here is where people become weak. They ignore patterns and cling to isolated words. You are. They replay a compliment while dismissing weeks of indifference. Or worse, they cling to indifference while dismissing weeks of effort. You are. You must discipline your perception. Do not evaluate attraction based on intensity. Evaluate it based on stability. Intensity burns fast. Stability builds trust. You are. Consistent behavior means emotional availability over time, means no disappearing acts. It means no hot and cold cycles designed to maintain control. You are. Real attraction seeks closeness, not power. If someone truly feels drawn to you, their actions reduce distance, not create confusion. You are. They will find reasons to extend conversations. They will create shared experiences. They will protect the connection instead of testing it. You are. Look at the micro behaviors. The way he subtly turns his body towards you in a group. The way his tone softens when speaking directly to you. You are. The way he laughs more freely around you than others. The way he checks your reaction after he says something bold. These are not theatrical performances. You are. These are unconscious signals of investment. And when those signals appear repeatedly, not once, not twice, but consistently, you are. That is mutual attraction surfacing through behavior. Attraction also reveals itself in responsiveness. When you withdraw slightly, does he move closer? You are. When you share something vulnerable, does he lean in or deflect? When you succeed, does he celebrate or compete? You are. Consistent positive responsiveness signals emotional alignment. Inconsistent reactions signal ego or uncertainty. You must observe calmly, you are, without projecting fantasy onto neutral actions. And understand this clearly, consistency requires courage. It is easy to flirt sporadically. You are. It is harder to maintain steady interest without guarantees. When someone remains present despite ambiguity, that presence itself is a statement. Words may hesitate. You are. Pride may interfere. Fear may silence confession. But behavior continues to speak. It says, I choose you again today. You are. Mutual attraction becomes undeniable when both parties mirror this steadiness. You reach out and he responds. He suggests meeting and you accept with enthusiasm. You are. You both maintain engagement without manipulation. There is no strategic withdrawal, no artificial scarcity. You are. Just two people steadily moving toward each other through repeated action. That is not drama, that is alignment. If you want clarity, stop listening for declarations. You are. Watch for discipline that does not fluctuate wildly with mood. Watch for reliability under ordinary circumstances, not just heightened moments. You are. Grand gestures can be manufactured. Consistency cannot. It requires genuine desire, and you must hold yourself to the same standard. You are. Do not demand steady effort while offering chaos. If you are truly attracted, demonstrate it through stable presence. Respond thoughtfully. You are. Show up when you say you will. Maintain your energy. Mutual attraction strengthens when both individuals act with integrity. You are. It weakens when one tests and the other chases. In the end, attraction proven by behavior creates security. Security creates trust. Trust creates depth. You are. Words alone create fantasy. Behavior creates foundation. If someone's actions repeatedly move toward you with respect, with attentiveness, with reliability, you are. Believe what you are seeing. Patterns do not lie. People reveal themselves through what they repeatedly do. You are. And when you learn to evaluate attraction through consistency rather than speech, you eliminate confusion. You replace anxiety with observation. You are. You replace guessing with evidence. And that shift from emotional speculation to disciplined awareness is where real strength begins. You are. Fear of vulnerability is the primary reason people deny obvious feelings. Not confusion, not timing, not mixed signals. Fear. Raw, you are. Unfiltered fear of being seen without armor. When someone feels something real, the first instinct is rarely celebration. It is protection, you are. Because to admit you care is to hand someone the power to hurt you. The moment you acknowledge attraction, you risk rejection, you risk embarrassment, you are. You risk losing control of the image you have carefully constructed. And most people would rather live in silent longing than face exposed uncertainty. Understand this clearly, vulnerability threatens the ego. The ego wants dominance, certainty, superiority. Vulnerability demands humility. You are. It demands that you step forward without guarantees. It demands that you say, "This matters to me," knowing the response may not match your hope. You are. That is psychologically destabilizing for anyone who builds identity around control. So what do people do? They deny what is obvious. They minimize their feelings. You are. They call it just friendship. They pretend indifference. They mock what they secretly desire. They bury genuine emotion under sarcasm and delay. You are. Not because the feeling isn't real, but because it is too real. When attraction grows, so does risk. If you don't care, you cannot be wounded. But the moment you care, you become exposed. That exposure triggers defense mechanisms. You start analyzing instead of acting. You test instead of expressing. You are. You withdraw slightly to see if they chase. You create emotional distance to maintain leverage. All of this is fear disguising itself as strategy. The tragedy is this, you are. Both people often feel the same fear at the same time. Both sense the connection. Both recognize the tension. Both replay conversations in their mind. You are. Yet neither moves. Each waits for certainty. Each wants proof before commitment. But certainty only comes after vulnerability, not before it. You are. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's controlled courage. Weakness is hiding behind pride. Weakness is pretending not to care when you care deeply. You are. Weakness is allowing fear to dictate behavior. Strength is saying what is true without dramatizing it. Strength is risking discomfort in exchange for clarity. You are, and clarity is powerful. The moment one person speaks honestly, the fog dissolves. Even if the answer is no, the mind stabilizes. The anxiety ends. You are. You regain direction. But when you refuse vulnerability, you remain suspended in ambiguity. You overthink. You obsess. You assign meaning to small behaviors. You are. That mental chaos is far more exhausting than a simple, direct answer. Fear of vulnerability is rooted in past pain. Maybe you were rejected before. You are. Maybe you opened up and were dismissed. Maybe you trusted and were disappointed. The brain remembers emotional injury. It tries to prevent repetition. You are. So it signals caution when similar conditions appear. But protection can easily become paralysis. If you want something meaningful, you are. You must accept emotional risk as part of the process. There is no connection without exposure. No intimacy without honesty. No depth without openness. You are. You cannot build a real bond while hiding your authentic emotional position. Observe how people behave when they are afraid to be vulnerable. They send mixed signals. You are. They oscillate between warmth and coldness. They hint instead of state. They flirt but never escalate. They avoid defining anything. It feels confusing. You are. But beneath the confusion is a simple truth: they are protecting themselves. And you may be doing the same. Ask yourself this, you are. Are you denying your feelings because they are unclear, or because they are clear and therefore dangerous? Most people already know the answer. You are. They just don't want to confront it. Growth demands that you confront it. The moment you decide to operate from courage rather than fear, your behavior changes. You are. You become direct but calm. You express interest without desperation. You ask instead of assume. You listen instead of imagine. You are. You replace emotional guessing with adult communication. That shift alone transforms your relationships. Yes, vulnerability can lead to rejection. It can also lead to alignment, intimacy, and mutual respect. Avoiding vulnerability guarantees stagnation. Embracing it creates possibility. At some point, you are. You must decide whether your priority is safety or truth. Safety keeps you protected but isolated. Truth exposes you but opens the door to connection. You are. If you constantly choose safety, you will never experience depth. You will only experience controlled interactions that never fully satisfy you. You are. Fear will always whisper reasons to stay silent. It will tell you to wait, to gather more evidence, to protect your image. You are. But courage does not wait for perfect conditions. Courage acts when something matters. If you feel something real, acknowledge it to yourself first. You are. Stop denying what is obvious internally. Then decide whether you are willing to step forward with dignity. You do not need dramatic declarations. You are just honest expression, calm, grounded. Because in the end, the pain of vulnerability is temporary. The regret of suppression lingers. You are. And the strongest people are not those who avoid emotional risk. They are the ones who face it directly and remain standing regardless of outcome. You are. Emotional courage separates passive longing from decisive action. It is the line between watching your life happen and shaping it with your own hands. You are. It is the difference between silent desire and deliberate movement. Many people feel deeply. Very few act boldly. And that gap, that space between feeling and action, you are, is where regret is born. Passive longing is comfortable. It allows you to fantasize without risk. You can replay conversations, imagine outcomes. You are. Construct perfect scenarios in your mind. In imagination, you are safe. There is no rejection there, no embarrassment, no failure. But there is also no progress. You are. No growth, no real connection. Passive longing feeds the ego while starving the soul. Emotional courage disrupts that pattern. You are. It demands that you step beyond internal emotion and translate it into external behavior. It asks you to speak when silence feels easier. You are. It asks you to initiate when waiting feels safer. It asks you to risk clarity instead of clinging to possibility. You are. And most people hesitate because decisive action removes the comfort of uncertainty. Uncertainty is seductive. As long as nothing is defined, hope remains unlimited. You are. The moment you act, the range of outcomes narrows. You either move forward together or you confront reality. That narrowing feels threatening to the ego. You are. But it is liberating to the spirit, because truth, even difficult truth, stabilizes you. It gives you direction. Emotional courage is not recklessness. You are. It is controlled strength. It is the ability to say, this matters to me, without collapsing if the response is not what you hoped. It is grounded confidence. You are. It does not beg. It does not pressure. It simply expresses and stands firm. That firmness is powerful because it signals self-respect. Passive longing, you are, on the other hand, breeds insecurity. When you do not act, your mind fills the silence with doubt. You begin to question your worth. You are. You interpret small details as evidence. You become hyper-aware of every delay, every shift in tone, every minor change in behavior. You are. You lose stability because you have surrendered control of your narrative. You are waiting instead of leading. Decisive action restores control. You are. It transforms you from observer to participant. Instead of wondering where you stand, you ask. Instead of hoping they notice you, you show up clearly. You are. Instead of testing through indirect signals, you communicate directly. That shift alone elevates your presence. You are. People respond differently to those who move with clarity. There is a deeper psychological truth here. Action reduces anxiety. You are. The longer you avoid expressing your feelings, the heavier they become. They occupy mental space. They drain energy. But the moment you act, you are. Even if the outcome is uncertain, the tension decreases. You regain alignment between what you feel and what you do. That alignment builds internal strength. You are. Emotional courage also filters relationships quickly. When you act decisively, you discover who meets you with equal strength. You are. If someone retreats when you move forward with calm honesty, you have learned something valuable. If they step towards you, you have created momentum. Either way, you are. You win. Because you are no longer trapped in speculation. People often confuse emotional courage with dramatic gestures. It is not about grand declarations. You are. It is about simple, direct movement, a clear invitation, a straightforward statement of interest, a conversation that defines intention. These are not extreme acts. You are. They are mature ones, yet they require bravery because they eliminate hiding places. The world does not reward hesitation. You are. It rewards those who take responsibility for their desires. If you want connection, create opportunity. If you feel attraction, express it with composure. You are. If you sense potential, test it with action. Passive longing might feel romantic, but it is fundamentally powerless. It keeps you reactive. You are. Emotional courage transforms you into someone who can handle reality, and that capacity extends beyond relationships. When you practice acting despite fear, you are. You strengthen your character. You become less dependent on validation. You detach your identity from outcomes. You learn that rejection does not destroy you. You are. It refines you. Every meaningful relationship begins because at least one person decided to move. They interrupted the silence. They chose clarity over comfort. You are. That choice changed everything. Imagine how many connections never formed because both individuals waited for certainty that never arrived. Ask yourself honestly, you are. Are you longing or are you leading? Are you hoping something happens or are you willing to make it happen? Emotional courage does not guarantee success. You are, but it guarantees growth, and growth builds resilience. In the end, decisive action creates peace. You no longer replay endless possibilities. You stand on truth. You are. You accept outcomes with dignity. You respect yourself because you acted in alignment with your feelings instead of hiding from them. You are. And that is the essence of strength, not the absence of fear, but movement despite it. You are. Emotional courage draws the boundary between those who watch their lives unfold from a distance and those who step forward and claim them. You are. Clarity and responsibility are more powerful than guessing and overthinking. They cut through emotional chaos like a blade through fog. You are. While others sit trapped in analysis, replaying conversations and decoding text messages as if they were complex riddles, you are the person who chooses clarity, steps forward, and replaces confusion with direction. That is power, not noise, not drama. Direction. Guessing feels active, you are, but it is passive. Overthinking feels intelligent, but it is avoidance. You convince yourself that if you analyze every word, every pause, every emoji, you are. You will eventually uncover certainty without taking any risk. But certainty does not emerge from mental repetition. It emerges from honest communication. You are. And communication requires responsibility. Responsibility begins with owning your feelings. You are. Not blaming the other person for mixed signals. Not accusing circumstances, not hiding behind pride. If you feel something, acknowledge it internally. You are. If you want clarity, accept that it is your responsibility to pursue it. You are. Waiting for someone else to define the situation while you remain silent is surrender disguised as patience. Overthinking is often fear in intellectual clothing. You are. You tell yourself you are being cautious, but what you are really doing is protecting your ego. You are trying to avoid discomfort. You are trying to avoid rejection. You are. So you stay in your head, you construct scenarios, you predict outcomes, you debate interpretations, but none of that changes reality. It only amplifies anxiety. You are. Clarity simplifies everything. When you communicate directly, you eliminate speculation. A calm, grounded question can resolve weeks of mental stress. You are. A straightforward expression of interest can replace endless internal debate. Yes, clarity carries risk. The answer may not match your expectation. You are. But even a disappointing answer is stabilizing. It gives you ground to stand on. Responsibility also means managing your reactions. You are. If someone does not reciprocate your feelings, responsibility prevents you from collapsing into resentment. You accept the outcome with maturity. You are. You recognize that not every connection aligns. You move forward without bitterness. That emotional discipline strengthens you. You are. People who avoid responsibility often become trapped in patterns. They complain about confusion while contributing to it. They expect others to read their minds. You are. They send indirect signals and hope for perfect interpretation. That is not strength. That is immaturity. Mature individuals speak clearly. They state intentions. You are. They listen carefully. They respond appropriately. Clarity does not require aggression. It requires composure. You do not demand answers. You request understanding. You are. You do not force outcomes. You seek truth. There is a difference. The person who operates from clarity stands upright, emotionally steady, prepared for any response. You are. That steadiness commands respect. Overthinking drains energy because it keeps you in a loop without resolution. You revisit the same conversation repeatedly. You are. Searching for hidden meaning. You ask friends for interpretations. You analyze tone shifts. And still, you remain uncertain. That uncertainty erodes confidence. You are. It makes you hesitant. It affects your posture, your voice, your behavior. Internal chaos eventually becomes external insecurity. Clarity restores alignment. You are. When your thoughts, words, and actions match, you feel grounded. You stop performing. You stop strategizing. You simply express. You are. That authenticity creates stronger connections because it removes manipulation. People feel safe around clarity. They trust it. They respond to it. You are. Responsibility also means recognizing when someone else's behavior is inconsistent. Instead of rationalizing red flags, you evaluate patterns objectively. You are. If effort is inconsistent, you acknowledge it. If communication is vague, you address it. If actions contradict words, you prioritize actions. You are. Responsibility protects you from self-deception. There is immense freedom in abandoning guesswork. You are. Imagine the mental space you reclaim when you no longer try to decode every interaction. You are. Imagine the confidence that develops when you know you can handle direct conversations without crumbling. That is personal power. You are. Life does not reward those who hide behind speculation. It rewards those who engage reality directly. If you want depth, create clarity. If you want security, you are. Take responsibility. If you want peace, stop rehearsing imaginary scenarios and start having real conversations. You cannot control how someone feels about you. You are. But you can control how you approach uncertainty. You can choose courage over confusion. You can choose ownership over avoidance. That choice transforms you. You are, in the end, guessing prolongs anxiety. Overthinking magnifies fear. Clarity resolves tension. Responsibility builds strength. When you adopt both, you stop drifting through emotional ambiguity. You begin leading your interactions with intention. And that is the mark of maturity, not perfect outcomes, but decisive engagement with reality. Clarity and responsibility do not guarantee reciprocation. They guarantee growth. They guarantee self-respect. And that foundation is far more powerful than any temporary comfort overthinking pretends to provide.